Welcome to Stowe Talks, where we get to spend some time thinking about ideas and innovation for social change. What I'd like to do as we begin is to think briefly about each of the words. Words structure our worlds, so we need to think about words and the worlds we create with them. In the environmental arena, for example, when we talk about a good job instead of good work, it changes the nature of the conversation, and sometimes it changes nature itself. When we talk about the good life in America, without asking what that good really means, we reinforce environmental impacts without even thinking about it. Words like profit and progress and success and cheap and fun and cool, words we don't even think of as environmental, have a lot to do with the way we treat the natural world. In all sorts of fields, from farming to finance, we've defined success, which is another important word, for example, in ways that have nothing to do with replenishing the natural capital we spend so freely. Farming isn't really successful unless it creates topsoil as well as crops, but industrial agriculture doesn't do that very well. In less than 2 centuries of white settlement in the upper Midwest, we've already used about half the topsoil that was here when we came. So what about the words we begin with today? What about ideas and innovation and social change? Ideas should need no introduction on a college campus. An idea is a concept, thought, or notion, but it can also be an opinion or view or belief, or an intention or plan of action. The word idea comes from the Greek word for pattern, so today we'll be searching through patterns, seeking to make sense of what we see in the world and make it into a new pattern that's aesthetically and ethically pleasing. But I'd like to suggest that things are ideas too, embodied ideas. So a car is an idea of individual mobility rendered in steel and glass and rubber and plastic. A toilet is a porcelain idea, speaking both about public health, but also about an out-of-sight, out-of-mind culture. The material world is filled with ideas, but in an American culture of distraction, we often aren't paying attention. An ideal is a particular kind of idea, a conception of perfection, a standard of excellence, a model for behavior, or the ultimate aim of endeavor, especially one of noble character. It's an imaginative pattern that offers a vision of how things might be better, and which ideally leads to action. So both ideas and ideals have built right into them, in the root or radical sense of the word, a conception of responsibility. Because if Stowe Talks is only talk, if it doesn't lead us eventually to some kind of action, it will just be a talk show. Innovation is simply what's new, so it could be as superficial as fashion or cosmetics or a new sandwich at Subway. Conversely, it could be as substantial as a new strain of rice or wheat that needs less water, or a new public policy that provides real social security to a nation's population. Americans are, in general, neophiliacs, people in love with the new. So at an event like this, we'll surely be sorting the so-called new and improved from the merely new and unproved. We need innovation, but we don't really need a new brand of bottled water, to give a recent local example. Indeed, I'd like to suggest that what we need today is not just generic innovation, but systems innovation. Especially in the world of commodities and commercialism, products often address the symptoms, but not the systems of things. All of the major food corporations, for example, have subdivisions that sell organic and natural foods, but they don't yet have a conception of a new food system that would change the default settings of the one we have now, linking obese consumers to the earth through supermarkets and industrial agriculture. We need a new food system and a business model that works for it, but instead, for the most part, we get new products. Social change is the third word we deal with today. And it's in many ways the most interesting because it can be so many things. Often when we think about social change movements, we think of the labor movement or the women's movement or the civil rights movement, usually groups of activists usually engaged in the political process. In our past, these movements have usually coalesced around 2 big goals: justice and what Martin Luther King called somebodyness. In America, we have at least 2 ideas of justice, one procedural and one substantive. Procedural justice is what our courts attend to, which is why our symbol of justice is a blinded woman holding scales in which we follow established procedure to arrive at decisions. Activists concerned about substantive justice wonder whether procedural justice actually arrives at fairness and whether it might be smarter if the woman took the blindfold off to see if anybody is weighting the scales or whether the result is really fair. People looking for substantive justice often embrace the idea of justice articulated by John Rawls, in which we would know that we had a just society if anybody were willing to trade places with anybody else. In such a society, you could have inequality, but it wouldn't really be fair unless rich and privileged people were willing to trade places with people at the bottom of the economic ladder. We don't yet live in that society. The idea of justice as fairness is related to the idea of somebodyness, which was Dr. King's way of capturing both the importance of human dignity and the idea of agency. King thought that the goal of the civil rights movement was not just to achieve legislation or end discrimination and prejudice, but to enhance the somebodyness of people who participated in the movement. But as I said at the beginning, social change has many faces, and not all of them look like activists, whatever that look is. In the United States, one of the primary places of social change is the business world. Think of all the activists you know and ask how many of them have created as much social change as Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Henry Ford or Sam Walton or Philo Farnsworth. Philo was the inventor of TV. We think that Bill Gates is creating social change when his foundation donates money to ending malaria and other tropical diseases. But the whole enterprise of Microsoft changed our world, and mostly for the better. I remember what it was like to write on a typewriter, and then on a computer before there were word processing programs. I am the old guy in the room. And Bill Gates surely made my life both easier and more productive. Business can be a good place for social change, especially if consumers like us supply the demand for goods and services that are good for people and the planet. Another place for social change is government, often because of the pressure of activists or of business or other concerned citizens. The crucial thing about government, if you like it, and the insidious thing if you don't, is that it gets to set the parameters for behavior, shaping the default settings of our society. After the 1964 Civil Rights Act, for example, the default settings changed. After the National Environmental Policy Act, the default settings changed again. In the Reagan administration, the default settings shifted back towards small government and big business. In the 2012 election, what we're basically debating is who gets to set the default settings of our society and whose ideas and ideals will be embodied in our lives. So it really matters. Social change is not optional. It's going to happen whether we do anything or not. The question is who shapes the change and for what purposes? And social change doesn't depend on our activism either. Inertia, apathy, and indifference are all agents of social change that somebody else is making. When I'm silent or passive about my deepest values, someone else gets to shape our institutions to reflect and reinforce their deepest values. I'd like to conclude with a reading I often share in my classes. It shows up on the internet as a Franciscan benediction or a prayer of St. Francis, but I really have my doubts that St. Francis uploaded it there. But here it is. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships so that you will live deep in your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people and the earth so that you will work for justice, equity, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer so that you will reach out with your hands to comfort them and change their pain into joy. And may God bless you with the foolishness to think that you can make a difference in the world so that you will do all the things that others say cannot be done. As we ponder ideas, innovation, and social change today, let's remember that there's lots of good work to do and lots of good places to do it. We need all the good ideas we can get, but we also need a way to get those ideas and innovations into the so-called real world. It should be an exciting afternoon. Thank you.